Hello humans, it is I, Mr. Bell, coming at you with a little demo. Ultimately what we're going to be making is shapes kind of like this, or not necessarily this shape, but the idea of using paper mache, which is really just a water and glue mixture, combining that idea with using wire frames, thinking about making the outside edges of these shapes, and then using paper mache to cover them and make them into more solid looking objects. Bearing in mind, as we go forward with this, we're going to paint these, or you have the option to paint these, so they won't necessarily just be white, and this is still wet, so it'll look a little bit more solid as it dries. I'm going to put that one aside. I have my wire frame already built. I'm going to go with this little triangle guy. I want to take a second to point out how I connected these. I just made two little loops and kind of hooked them onto each other to make this a pretty solid object that's not going to fall apart very easy. So I'm going to make this into paper mache. Right now, this is pretty much just regular old water. I put a little bit of glue in it, but I think it needs a little bit more. A little bit really does go a long way with this. You really don't need to add that much. I'd say that's about half. That's about as much. I put in about that already. Now I'm going to mix it. There is no like exact measurement for how much glue you should put it in. But really with glue and this water, a little bit does really go a long way. The glue just kind of helps it along. Really what this is going to be doing is merging these paper fibers together to make it, like you could do this really without any water or any glue at all, but that glue just kind of helps it along. So I want to cover this shape in that paper mache to make it look like it is a solid object, or to really make it a solid object, right? So all I'm going to do is I'm using regular old printer paper here. I'm going to rip off a strip. Really what the object for this is you want this paper, you can usually just cover it in one sheet, but you want it to be able to wrap around that object fully. The less strips you use, the stronger it will be. So for this, you got to get your hands dirty. Not really dirty, but you got to get them covered in water and glue. Not a big deal. I'm going to take this, I'm going to give it a good soak. I don't want to soak it too long, but I want to make sure that all the paper fibers in this get saturated with that mixture. Take it out. I'm going to add my thing. I think I'm going to put it right around there because this looks like it'll wrap around it really well. And then that's really all I'm going to do, really gently. I'm going to take this paper and I'm going to wrap it around my wire scaffold that I already have. Trying my best to make this paper fit the form of the wire, right? Because I want the wire to be the shape and I want the paper just to kind of cover it. Thinking of this paper as really basically skin. We've talked about this with our cardboard unit already. It's basically the same thing, only this time it's using wire for the strength and the paper is going to be really fragile, but it will stick to that wire, which will give it strength. Just gently wrapping it. As I do this, like this sheet, I'm going to put it over this bad boy, but I'm going to give it a little pinch on the middle. That's really just to squish those paper fibers together to make them fit your needs. You are the boss of the paper. It is not the boss of you. Give it another pinch. Kind of wrap it around, and bam, I have a paper mache object that I can go back and I can add some more wire to this to make it a little bit more secure. And then, maybe it's an armature or an arm that's going to hold this out, and there's going to be another shape on the other side to play with that idea of balancing. Right now, I briefly want to show you one more thing about wire. So I'm going to cut out just a little bit more. Got my wire here. Sometimes with these shapes, you want to leave them closed, right? You want to maybe attach them later, but maybe you want to be mindful of how you're going to attach it to the arm. So maybe I have like a really long piece of wire here, and I want to have that wire go all the way off to the other shape. So I'm going to really quickly make a little shape on this guy. This is kind of maybe smaller scale than you should be working on. Maybe think of this as like double the size of this or so. But I'm just trying to save some wire, so I'm making this real small. And there's nothing wrong with going really small, too. You could go on a really small scale and have like a bunch of little shapes versus maybe like a fewer or less larger shapes. So I got my shape here. I got my little loop. It's pretty secure. But now on the other side, I could do another shape over here. Maybe I want this one to go up. Kind of like so. Make that other loop. And then if I wanted to, I could cover the arm in paper mache. And when I say arm, I mean this part. Or I could just cover each end if I want that wire to be exposed. Play with that. Sometimes these are going to be a lot more interesting. If there's some wire exposed and there's some that are totally covered, you can be really creative with how you do that. But if I wanted to, I could paper mache this little guy and this little guy and leave that in there. Or I really can do another strip. If I want this wire to be covered, or maybe I want to paint this, dip it in that paper mache again. And then really, you can cover this whole thing. This paper is really malleable. Malleable means that you can kind of control exactly where it goes. So I'm literally just wrapping that wire up like so. Really pushing it together. And bam, I have the start of something that could be just covered fully in paper. And then if I don't like this area in the middle, I can rip off that paper as I go, kind of making that having that plan ahead of me. But also, if I want to change that plan, I totally can. See you in a sec.